Hello and welcome to the Business of Hearing podcast. And today we have a special guest. Now, this interview is interesting for a number of reasons, but I believe the key one is, as you're about to learn, today's guest almost stumbled upon that during the COVID times, let's call it, they didn't just survive, but they thrived. Um, and I really wanted to understand how. Because the majority of businesses from March 2020 to who knows when have almost put things on somewhat of a pause and accepted that, oh, things aren't the same, therefore we'll wait till things turn back to normal until normality can return and business will get back to where we want it to be. But what today's guest did was accept what was happening, control their controllables, and take the steps in order to do the right things that have seen them grow as a business, win more local trust, and fill their schedule. So that's going to be super interesting. On top of that, the second key thing that we discussed was value proposition. Because this is baffling, as we talk about in this episode, because the large majority of clinics do not really understand why anybody should choose them over all other options available to them. It's like being let's say there's a busy New York street and there's 10 pizza shops and they all say, we do great pizza and we're nice people on every door. Like, how are you ever going to decide which is right for you? You're going to either decide on who is the cheapest or which looks the most convenient, i.e. who has no queue, no line, etc. And as it stands, the majority of the hearing care industry are these pizza shops. They say, oh, we're nice people, we do a good job, come and buy hearing aids from us. And understanding that you need to look at how you're different, who you're for, and why somebody should choose you. In the same way a pizza shop can offer gourmet pizzas, or one can offer, authentic Italian pizzas, etc. Weird analogy, I know, but that applied to hearing care is super, super important. And one thing today's guest has done has very much understood who they are, who they're for, and why somebody should choose them, and not just say it, but prove it to a standard that I've not seen anybody else do in this industry. So we'll dive into that. So without further ado, let's jump in to this episode.
Welcome to the Business of Hearing podcast, the podcast for high-performing hearing care clinics that want to learn the strategies, ideas, and truths behind some of the smartest private practice clinics in the world. Now, time for your hosts, Phil M. Jones and Ollie Luke.
So I'm joined today by Dr. Nancy Duncan, founder of Duncan Hearing Healthcare. Started in 2003, 3 locations across Massachusetts, and I'm excited and intrigued for this interview. So, Nancy, I suppose best starting point is tell us a bit about you. I suppose your story of how you've got to where you are today.
Well, I had been an audiologist for about 5 years when in 2003, I decided that I knew I always wanted to do private practice, and I didn't want to get too far into audiology and too comfortable in a position where I was making too much money to go into private practice and leave a lucrative position. So I decided it was time to jump. And about trying to secure financing, et cetera. And that was a journey into itself because they don't teach you any of that in school. I just thought I'd show up at a bank and tell them my story and how super smart I was, and they would just give me money. And that proved to have many roadblocks. I had to actually take out a home equity line on the house and risk everything, and decided, you know what, it was worth it, and did it. And it all worked because then at that point I couldn't fail. And so in 2003, I opened my first location from scratch and just hoped for the best. And it worked out, thankfully. We were profitable in the first year, surprisingly, and have been so every year since. This year obviously proved its own challenges, but we've been able to survive and somewhat thrive in it. And just every year, initially it was myself with my husband coming in after his overnight job and playing secretary for a little bit, my dad jumping in his early retirement to help out, and I'd stay late and do billing and answer phones and work, 60 hours a week, just trying to get it off the ground. And that was before I had my child. 3 years in, I decided to start our family, and that was its own adventure because, again, you don't know what you don't know. And so I thought, well, I'll just bring them to work with me. That proved to be interesting, and anybody who has children realizes how silly that statement is. But I thought, well, they'll just sit quietly in another room while I work, and that proved its own challenges. And it just continued to grow and figure it out as you went. And so I initially added one staff member, and that was my first secretary, and grew slowly and surely along the way, and found alliances. And I think that was, my biggest growth moment was realizing that I didn't know it all, and that I couldn't do it all myself, and that I needed to align myself with people who were smarter than myself in certain areas, who could help me get to the next level, or else I was never going to get there. And so that's where I started to see my dream grow, and get to the point where I had more and more employees, because I just couldn't see outside of how was I going to do this where I wasn't the sole provider. And once I got past that, that's where it really began to grow, where I started bringing on other people to see patients with me, and then bringing on other locations where I could then grow our patient population and really see, my vision come to life, which was really great. And now, I really have the practice I envisioned from the get-go, and it's really continuing to grow and blossom to something else over time. And that's what I really wanted it to be. So it's been a journey, to say the least. And it continues. Every day I'm learning something new. This year has just taught me a lot about myself and a lot about the practice. So, it's a good thing. That's the beauty of private practice, is you never stop learning.
Amazing. And two things you touched upon then that I'd love to dive a little bit deeper into. Mm-hmm. The first one, you mentioned about getting to that stage where you need to go past being the provider. Yeah. Now, I know that's a roadblock that holds many up and is difficult. And I'd love just to delve more into your experience, mm-hmm. of how that challenge was and the steps that was taken, and then like some of the big key lessons out of that.
Yeah, I think, often as audiologists, we're many, many times type A personalities. And we believe, probably rightfully so, that we're the only person that can see that patient as good as we can. Because being the business owner, we have a certain level of expect of how we want to take care of that patient. And it's hard to give up that idea that someone else can do it as good as we can. And so you have to be not afraid to delegate. And I really stumbled on that. I really struggled with allowing that to happen. And so when I first started bringing people on, I would really get annoyed, and I'd say, they can't do it as well as I can. I'll take that patient back. And then I found myself working harder than ever, but paying other people at the same time. And I thought, well, how stupid is this? I'm still working harder than they are, but I'm paying them. And then I realized that, they weren't the issue. I wasn't training them to do what I wanted them to do. And how would they know otherwise if I didn't teach them? So, often when we're in private practice, our goal is to work, and use every second of every day. And I really started working on teaching and training my staff. And so we would set up, like often in the beginning, I would really spend a lot of time training that new person to know what we wanted from them and know what the expectation was, but also setting up systems, and not to micromanage, because that's the worst thing you want to do, but set up expectations. This is our procedure. This is how we'd like it done. This is how we want this patient's experience to be. And I felt like the provider really latched on and liked that, because without guidance, they didn't know what to do. So they would just sort of wing it, often the opposite direction of what I wanted. And then they were frustrated. So it really was much better when I was giving guidance to them. And then it's now morphed into, now that I have a very well-trained team, we do, usually yearly, we do a day-long training where we close down the office. Everybody comes in, and we actually call it the Office Olympics, where we, generally it's something where we're maybe shifting price points. We're changing all the pricing, or changing how we're presenting something. So we spend a day with it, teasing it out, or spend a day really focusing on a topic. But in between, we do like minute to win it games, and I assign teams. And sometimes those teams are maybe two staff members that are struggling to communicate or struggling to get along. And it really changes the dynamic in the office. And so and it's funny to see how they work together because they want a prize at the end of the day. And sometimes the prize is a gift card or what have you, but they have so much fun. And at the end of the day, it really changes how the office moves forward. So it's all about training, but first knowing what it is that you do that makes that patient experience special. And then how do you translate that into teaching someone how to do it and then teaching that, because that is the key to then being able to make the office grow and making your team as strong as you are. And that's the key.
Amazing. And one of the things I wanted to discuss on this was, I suppose, a compliment to you and your team, how well you pivoted during COVID and almost like completely changed the model, and not just changed the model, but then did the work in order to almost become the best at it, which is one thing we'll touch upon. So I love Office Olympics. That's super interesting. Second thing you mentioned, during COVID, you didn't just survive, but thrived. Now I know, I'm going to take a guess here, but 90% of the rest of the industry would have a completely different view of that, the last 12 months. What are some of the things that you did? I'd love a walkthrough of how you dealt with so much adversity and what you did as a team and as a business in order to not just survive, but thrive.
Well, part of it I owe to you all. I will give credit where credit is due, because in the beginning, you just sort of sat there going, there's no playbook for this. We all just didn't know what to do. In Massachusetts, where we're at, we were ordered to shut down. Our industry fell in a gray area, and we reached out to health departments and all sorts of industry to find out, can we stay open? Can we not stay open? And there was no answers. So we shut down for the mandatory 2 weeks, and then it continued for 8 weeks. And part of it was we didn't have enough PPE in the beginning. So we decided to stay shut during that time while I accumulated PPE and worked on what next steps were, because we just didn't know what to do. So during that time, we kept the staff busy because I kept them on, working from home by calling patients, just check in and making sure you're doing okay, seeing how if you needed batteries, do you need us to take care of anything? And half the time it was just the staff ended up having a conversation because these people were homebound and had no interaction, and they were just so happy to have somebody call them. So that ended up going a long way with our patient database. The other thing was, as patients called, we had people manning the phone. So everybody took a day, and phone calls were sent to their cell phone. And we were finding that patients really needed us more than we realized they would. So we then started transitioning into having a person go into the office just to be there to run down and grab hearing aids curbside. So then that morphed into, okay, we really need an avenue for curbside care. So it was just sort of plugging holes as they came up of what was needed. And that then translated into, once we were able to open 8 weeks after the closure, getting a sandwich board sign we had a circular drive in front of the office that said, curbside care, drive up, call the office, and people would call, we'd run down, grab the hearing aids, and just finding any way we could help people where they were. So with whatever safety level they required. So some people didn't feel comfortable coming up, that was fine. We'd come down to them. And I was amazed. And I think we talked about this at one point, Ali, we didn't know what was going to happen when we came back. We didn't know if people were going to feel comfortable coming in. We didn't know what the world was going to look like. I mean, this was all new. And we were shocked at how many patients we had tested prior to COVID happening who were tested, not sold. They were not interested in getting hearing devices. They felt they were doing fine. And they were calling and begging for appointments because with masks, they were no longer hearing well. And that was something we didn't expect. I don't know why we didn't see it coming. We just didn't see it coming. And so that's when we really started to work with you guys on, let's let physicians know this is a thing. And that's when that marketing campaign came about with the cards with masks, with the person had a mask on, and it was a card for the physician saying, your patients might be experiencing this, we can help. And that brought about a lot more physician referrals because we didn't realize we were one of the few offices in the area that were open and seeing patients actively. So that alerted them to that fact. And we then absorbed a lot of patients that way. So we were able to really, we then had a new problem, and a problem I would never complain about, but we had a full schedule for 6 weeks out, trying to find ways to see more and more patients. I normally have shorter hours. I was staying till 5 or 6 every night, trying to see more and more people because we had a need at that moment. And it was incredible. So it was just finding what the need was, filling the hole, and just taking care of people the best we could at that time in their need. So it's been incredible, and we're still learning every day because now we have new challenges with restrictions of people having to quarantine due to exposure, or people, having symptoms and having to stay home, staff. So we're always having to shift staffing and whatnot, but it is what it is, and we're getting it done.
Yeah, and I think that attitude is so important. Like I was reading an article yesterday, and it's a UK doctor that was predicting that COVID will be around for the next decade. And it just made me think of the number of businesses in this industry that are still like, we'll wait till things come back to normal and then we'll reopen and everything will be okay. And it's the businesses that just know that we need to deal with the problems of today, are the ones who are getting the biggest upper hand and winning patients from elsewhere and winning trust throughout the community. So
I think that's the hardest thing, because I tend to and I think a lot of business people are this way, you tend to like to control all the variables you can. That's what makes your day go smoothly. And, COVID has taught me that that's next to impossible, and I've just got to go with the flow. And, we've had to learn to pivot second by second, not just day by day at this point. And it is what it is. And you've just got to learn to manage all of that while still seeing patients.
Yeah, I hear you. Control your controllables and try to not stress about things that are out of your control. It's tough, but I think we've all had to get better at that over the past 18 months.
Yes, we have.
All right. So one thing that I do want to touch upon also is one thing that you guys have done really, really well is having a value, I suppose, a powerful value proposition. Now, like one thing that I still find crazy about this industry is because it had it so good for so long, where as long as you sold hearing aids in a certain location, you're going to get patients, because anybody who needs hearing aids are going to come to you. Whereas now everyone's got more choice than ever before. People are fussier than ever before. People have got access to choice better than any time in history. And explaining why somebody should choose you over all other options available to them has never been more important. And you guys have built this kind of most trusted value proposition where you position yourselves in category of one, and you don't just say that we're trusted by patients, physicians, organizations, but you've done a very good job of proving it through real life imagery of provider and patient, or audio clips of patients, or detailed patient case studies, or your curbside page, which from my perspective, although very simple, is one of the best I've seen in terms of proving that this is the way we do business and this is how it looks. What I'm wondering is, since defining your value proposition and making it super, super clear, what has the impact been on you, your staff, your patients, your business? How has it impacted things?
One of the things is, if you had asked me when I opened 17 years ago if we'd be on the internet and doing all this, I would have thought you were crazy. First of all, I would have said, what was social media? But it's been incredible. Patients really love the interaction, the ability to become part of our story. And they enjoy being asked to contribute and asked to give their opinions, because one patient said to me, and I didn't even consider this, she said, "You've helped me. I want to do anything I can to help you. And I want to do anything I can to tell people how important it is to come to people like you." And that, I felt blessed that she would say that, and so special. But she, made me realize that just asking patients, would you be willing, or would you be okay with doing something like this? Often they're more than happy to help out. And, we can say all we want, we're the best, or we're the most valued. It's when patients say it that speaks volumes to everyone else. And so we've seen over the last couple of years it go from people coming in from referrals, word of mouth, or just the phone book used to be the way to do it, to they're coming in by reading the reviews, Google reviews, reading reviews online from our website, or we saw your website and just love the look of it, and it looks so professional, and it answered all my questions right up front before I even called you. So it really transitioned the way we do things. People came in already educated, and it was because I was able to educate them before they walked in by having my patients educate them with their stories. So it really, really changed the way we do things. And it was the way I would have wanted to do it without even realizing that, if that makes sense.
Nice. And I think one thing on that, this most trusted play is such an underrated play. And one thing you've also done that I think is worth noting is you have a patient that's somewhat of a local radio host who's now featured as a prominent part of the website to give proof. And I think this is an opportunity for many, whether they have a notable patient and they should feature them and have their story featured, or even in today's world, like paying for endorsements from local celebrities, especially musicians. Like these people are desperate for some kind of income right now. There's so many opportunities to build trust through websites, through endorsements, and you've done a good job with that in an authentic way. So I suppose final two questions are questions that we ask everybody that we interview. And the first one is, what advice would you give to the Nancy in 2003 that's just about to open the doors to Duncan Hearing, knowing what you know now?
Hang on tight. And just always know who you are, know what you want your message to be, stay true to that, but be open to new ideas. And what I mean by that is along the way, you're going to run into a lot of noise and marketing things that people will say, and this is going to be the idea that's going to bring in 40 phone calls. This will be the thing that'll get you 120 phone calls. I hate to tell you, it's very rare and hard. And as far as I think, those things don't exist. And oftentimes those things that are proposed are often ideas that are going to ask you to sell out on your moral compass, meaning, I've had manufacturers along the way say, oh, you need to, advertise buy one, get one free on hearing aids or 50% off. And I say, that isn't who we are. That's not the reputation I want. And they'd almost want to force me into it. And I'd say, nope. And I'd move on. And they'd say, you're going to regret that someday. And we've always been a very slow and steady growth. And they'd always say, you're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong. And I feel like all the other folks that they've forced into that are either no longer here or really struggling. And we've been slow and steady, but I've always hung true to what my message was, what I wanted it to be. And I think that really plays off of that most trusted message because your reputation is everything. Hang on to that, stay true to it, make sure your message always relays that, and you'll be fine. And the rest will be easy.
Yeah, I can't agree with that enough. I think trust is the most valuable thing in marketing in today's world. You used to be able to get away with gimmicks and trials, and we're running a clinical study, but them things just lose trust. So the more you can,
the strong call to action is really no longer a thing.
Agreed. Second question is when you look at the hearing care industry, let's say the private practices across the country, what is one common mistake that you see many people make, or that you see others make, where you may have been through the same issue and you may have just answered that in your previous question?
Yeah, I think it's trying to not realize, not trusting your instincts is what it is. Because again, we're not really educated a lot, or at least my generation wasn't. I don't know about the new generation of audiologists coming out, but we weren't educated on business. So you had to rely on your instincts. And if you didn't, or if you didn't trust them, you often relied on people who would try to tell you what was right. And often I would do that, but some people, I said, okay, this seems to align with what my beliefs were. And the others, they didn't, but I'd still go along with it. And it often ended miserably. So really do trust your instincts and rely on things that if it makes you feel good and you feel like you can sleep at night, go with it. If you feel like that's going to be a problem, do not. You will regret it. So really stand by your morals and rely on that moral compass, because it will get you through. If you make a decision that's right for you and right for your family and right for your team, it's always a true decision.
Amazing. That's been awesome. So thank you so much for your time. I suppose final thing is, if people want to learn more about you, where should they go?
They can visit our website at duncanhearing.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. And Thanks for listening.
Thanks. Have a great day.
And there we have it. That is a wrap. Thank you so much for listening to the Business of Hearing podcast. Make sure you subscribe to be the first to know when a new episode goes live. If you're feeling kind enough to share your experience and leave us a 5-star review, it would mean the world to us. And if you want to learn more, then go to www.orange-grey.com for article, guides and trainings specifically written for high-performing hearing care businesses. We look forward to speaking to you again soon.